This is the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. This is where I post original content on YouTube about my audio podcasts, which are available at thebobdavispodcast.com, Spotify, iTunes, and other sources. Pretty much wherever you are looking for podcasts, you'll find this podcast on some aggregator. So it's the Bob Davis Podcasts at thebobdavispodcast.com. These videos on YouTube aren't the podcasts. They are additional content that I do after I have done the podcast, because usually I think about stuff that I didn't mention in the podcast that I feel like I should mention. And that's why YouTube is great, because I can come on YouTube later and talk about stuff. The last two podcasts I did were a series, parts 1 and 2, Lessons from Nomad Life, or Nomad Life Lessons. And I did them just because there's just been a culmination of stuff that I've kind of talked about in different podcasts that kind of I thought should go into 1 or 2 podcasts. The thing I've learned in doing this video and those podcasts is this is a really big subject. It gets very complex. Those of you who are nomads know what I'm talking about. If you aren't a nomad and you're thinking about doing this, it can get extremely complicated. So I'm kind of doing this video and these podcasts to help people who are considering nomad life. You know, the nomad life where you have a vehicle and you drive around and you go and you live in national forests and national parks and down in Quartzsite, Arizona at the Bureau of Land Management long-term visitor areas and other places, other campgrounds across the country. Sometimes we are associated with the van lifers. That's kind of a different tribe, although we all end up together down in Arizona during the winter. And RV life, which is RV people, usually retirees living on these various places, in their RVs. The nomad tribe, if you will, is kind of a unique group of people. So we come in buses, and we come in ambulances, and we come in minivans, and we come in our cars sometimes. And some of us are desperate, and some of us aren't desperate. Some of us work odd jobs on the road along the way. And we have chosen sort of a unique and separate lifestyle in the sense that most of us have given up everything we own to be on the road full time. And the purists will say you kind of have to do that. You kind of have to jettison everything and be on the road full time if you want to learn the lessons of nomad life and experience it. I'm going to start with the most important lesson which came to me after I finished the podcast. And the most important lesson of nomad life, I think, is that travel of any kind, so nomad travel, crisscrossing the United States, many times from all different directions. I've been in all the lower 48 states many times, and I only go on back roads. And I like to travel a lot. So, and this is just travel in the United States. Now, I've been in different countries. I've traveled. I've flown to other countries, been to Europe, been to China, been all over the country in various places in a different life. This is a different thing. This isn't that life. This is a unique experience of traveling where you cut loose and you're on the road full time. And I've been doing that for 4 years. After a while, there are some really great lessons that you learn about travel. And I'm going to talk about the thing that came to me after I finished the podcast that I didn't mention in the podcast, because you get so caught up in the lore. Me being me. When I say you, I mean me. I get so caught up in the lore that I forget that there's something really unique and fantastic about being able to travel all the time. And this is the reason I think it has such a romantic lure for people who are back in the world. And I am going to talk about some of the motivators if I get the chance later in this video. But I think the biggest lesson about travel is, almost without realizing it, almost without understanding what's happening to you, you get to the point where your mind begins to open. And I will just say that it's not something one would notice. It's something that happens almost subconsciously. And when you start to open your mind, then you start to have experiences which are different from whatever discipline you were in before you decided to start doing nomad travel or traveling full time. A good example for me was recently, I have a brother-in-law who's a farmer, and he said, hey, let's take the tour of the land that I'm farming. So we got in the truck and we drove around to all the different fields that he's either leased or he owns that he's farming these days. And I just went down the rabbit hole of agriculture, where I learned a little bit more about agriculture and what machines do what. And I was super excited about doing that because I have spent the last 2 years really on these back roads. Well, 4 years on the back roads, but really the last 2 years I've been noticing the degree of agriculture that we really don't notice in this country, the amount of agriculture, and the fact that agriculture as an industry is so significant in America. My mind probably would not have been open to that experience had I not been traveling and seeing these incredible, especially last year, I traveled out to New England from Wisconsin, where I am right now in northern Wisconsin, all the way out to New England. And I went down through Illinois and across through Indiana and Ohio and Pennsylvania up into upstate New York and Vermont, on into New Hampshire, and then later went to Maine. And this was in August at the peak of the growing season. So I went through these fields, all of these fields, and saw the sort of horn of plenty, which we used to joke about as a meme of the United States. I don't think that I would have been open to learning more about agriculture if it hadn't been for that experience. And it's subconscious. You don't realize it's happening to you, and it's a really great thing. It spreads your mind out. You start to be more open to other kinds of experiences than you were when you lived in the suburbs with the 2 cars and the job and the corporate life and everything else, whatever that was. So that's one of the things that you're not going to hear necessarily when you search the topic Nomad Life Lessons. One of the things that we are supposed to do, and I think it's a good practice, before you do a video or a podcast, you're looking for titles that will work so people get the word. And one of the things you can do is you can go on Google Select and you can enter the title, and then you'll see the other stuff that's got similar titles. One of the things I noticed when I posted the Nomad Life Lessons podcast in searching for those titles was there is so much content, but there's a dearth of content about nomad life because they really don't tell you what it's like. First of all, there are so many negative videos. I stopped doing nomad life, and this is why I'm having a hard time. This sucks, and this is why. And negative titles usually work really well, but in addition to that, there's all the 12 things you need to do before you become a nomad, 6 things you have to have if you're going to be a nomad, and they really don't give you an idea of what this is like. They don't give you the idea of the processes that we go through, which is really what I do. And so in these podcasts, if you're considering being a nomad, I'm not going to tell you what kind of power station or, they call them solar generators to get. I'm not going to tell you what kind of rig to get. I certainly reveal my biases as a nomad on why I don't think people should go out in their car and why I don't think minivans are great, although one of my best friends is out there right now. Tom is out there in his minivan. But even Tom has said, gee, I think I'm looking for a van because I need a little bit more space for my dog and myself because the minivan's pretty tight. And Tom, as I mentioned in that podcast, is very well organized and has exceptional organizational skills. So he would be a guy who could handle being in a minivan. But he even is looking for something else. So that's kind of a personal bias about nomad life and what you need to do. But I don't get into giving you lists of places to go, and I don't get into giving you a list of things that you have to have. I think the main thing to focus on and think about when you're thinking about becoming a nomad is you're leaving behind a certain lifestyle and you're embracing a certain lifestyle. So I talk about people who might be younger in their work lives who want to do this for a year as like a gap year thing, if you will, or even college graduates who want to do this as a gap year thing, and retirees who go out for 5 or 6 weeks and go back to the house, and maybe they go visit their niece or their grandsons or whatever, but they're not out all the time. The people that are out all the time have a different experience from the people that are out in spurts. Nothing wrong with going out in spurts. I did that. I think we all did that until we finally said, this is such a great thing to do. Who was I talking to the other day that was telling me that, oh yeah, it was my friend Bridget and Josh. They were telling me that they have a friend who, he's a veteran, got out of the Army, and was really got really into whatever you call it, trek biking or off-road biking or whatever it's called, trail biking. And they had a bus for a while, and he actually downsized into a pretty good-sized minivan. They have 2 little kids. And he was saying, it gets pretty hard with 2 little kids, but they were out for at least a year. And he said, I love the lifestyle. Unfortunately, we have 2 kids, and we've got to figure out, we can't do this with the rig that we have. So the reason I think people love it so much is because you get out and certainly time is different, and you get out and certainly you begin to learn these lessons because your mind becomes open to those things. So very quickly, and I talk about this in both podcasts. The first podcast I probably devote a little too much time to the economy, but and it's not academic discussion of the economy. It's just a statement that higher prices are sticky, and people are paying more and more for things. And while people have gotten raises at work, at the same time, work is starting to demand that people stop remote working and show up in the office. And then there's the ridiculous corporate environment or the office environment, and people are frustrated. They're frustrated with higher prices. They're frustrated with the state of things, even though, the economy is still growing. And if you travel, you can see the effects of a growing economy. So it's not about that. I'm not saying, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. I'm talking about how people are feeling this frustration in the work-a-day world, and so they might be looking for another option. And this is one of the options that certainly people could consider as an alternative lifestyle. There are other kinds of alternative lifestyles. I watched a fantastic video on YouTube recently from, I think she's German, but she might be Swiss. She had some health problems, and she couldn't walk anymore, and so she found a cabin in the Swiss mountains, and she moved there with her husband and I think she has 2 kids, to try to get her physical life, her physicality back. She'd been a long-distance runner and a mountain climber and all that stuff. And it was a very heartfelt, personal statement about leaving the old business world where she used to work and coming into this new world where they had to chop their own wood, they had to renovate the cabin themselves, and now they live there with their 2 boys. Well, this is an alternative lifestyle. So nomad life is not the only alternative lifestyle, but it's one of the most accessible, and here's why. All you need is some kind of an RV or a truck or minivan. God forbid you should do it in your car, and all you need is a map, and it's accessible. You can go from place to place and live. And so the interest in Nomad Life is about these different lifestyles and how people live and how we do this. And so these podcasts talk specifically about some of that stuff. How you might think about functioning. I hate to say should, and I hate to say you. I've done this video a couple times, and I have a terrible habit of saying you when I'm talking about me, and I'm talking about my experience. And I have a terrible habit of saying should. I hate it when people say should to me. So I'm not really saying should. I'm just saying if you were to think about doing this, one of the things to consider is what kind of vehicle you're gonna go in and how that's going to be. And the lessons are, I just think we consider the 12 things that we're supposed to do before we're supposed to do something. I also watch these sailing videos of people who have just chucked everything and bought a boat and started sailing. And the ones I like the most are the people that said, we didn't know anything about sailing. We didn't know anything about boats. We just jumped in and we started sailing. Now, some of those people die. Unfortunately, sailing's a little bit more dangerous than going out as a nomad in a vehicle like me and thousands of other people. But I think it's unique because they didn't go, I have to learn how to do all this stuff before I did. I'm gonna jump and I'm gonna learn my lessons along the way. My story is that I was traveling, and like I said, I kept coming back, and finally I thought, well, why am I coming home? I'm going out, I'm having this incredible experience when I go out, and I come back and I feel terrible. And why do I have to keep coming back? So I rounded everything up and got rid of it. And I thought, I'm not going out on the road in that ambulance. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy a bus or an RV, or I'm going to finish it off. And at the time, this was right before the pandemic hit, and during the time that the pandemic was hitting, and people were insane. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to go. And so I sold everything, got rid of everything, got out of my duplex, and hit the road. So when you cut the tether, that's when you're really a nomad. When you cut the tether and you drive away and you know that is the last time that you're going to see that place, and that's the last time you're going to see a place that you lived in, well, that's when a person who does this, really, the impact of it starts to come in. Finally, one of the things I didn't mention in the podcast that I thought it was important to mention is that there are ups and downs. I did say there were bad days, but there are ups and downs, and there's long periods where you think, I don't know if this is such a good idea, or this is really hard, because it is hard. There's days that are really difficult. There's days when you run out of money. There's days when you can't find, people can't find a part-time job that they want to work to sort of pay for their, travel. There are days when it's cold and rainy, or you have a breakdown, and you ask yourself, why am I doing this? And then there are days where you have really sublime experiences, and you go, oh yeah, that's right. Now I know why I'm doing this. And for me, it's the lessons learned from travel. It's also the flexibility of time, and how how I pack in a ton of living in a short period of time. I had a series of podcasts before this series that was basically entitled 6,000 Miles, 60 Days on the Road. And I had my niece got married in Florida in March, and I drove from Quartzsite, Arizona to Florida, and then I drove up here. So at the end of the day, it was somewhere around 6,000 miles, and it was 60 days in transit, staying in different truck stops and Walmart parking lots and Cracker Barrels and things like that. And I was really physically exhausted. It took me, and I'm still kind of recovering from that trip. Wouldn't trade the trip for the world. It was an incredible trip. And I'm sure going back down in the fall is going to be incredible. But I just thought the other day that was years ago. The wedding felt like it was years ago. And it was just March 15th. So it was really only, 180 days ago. So time starts to shift in strange ways, and you seem to pack a lot of living into a short period of time as a nomad. I think that's one of the great things about doing this. The other lessons are the different rigs that are available. That's in the podcasts. Where people stay, that's a question I get all the time. A lot of people ask, what's it like? Well, I've kind of done a pretty good job defining what it's like. A lot of people want to know things that are specific, like how much do the campgrounds cost, and all those kinds of things. And that information is in the podcast. I will post links to the podcast in the description box below so you can find it, and I'll write a little bit of stuff there and also I'll put a link to the main Bob Davis podcast page so you can see all the podcasts. I don't like these videos to go on so long, but see what happens is as soon as I start talking about this, it's such a big subject that each term or each statement is something that you almost have to unpack. So I'm going to just basically end this video. At this point, we're about 20 minutes. I don't feel any need to go on and on till 30 minutes or so. So trying to keep these a little shorter. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I just hit 2,400 subscribers. Woohoo! Big deal. Thank you for that. And also, thanks for subscribing to the Bob Davis Podcast's audio version at iTunes and listening on Spotify and right off the page at thebobdavispodcast.com. This is one of the cabins up here, which is about 175 feet from the shore, where I have all 5 elements. I have earth, fire, water, and lots of space, which is why it feels great down there, and I do a lot of videos down there. But if you just stop for a second, and I will just sit here for a second at the end. This is great because you can hear the wind in the trees. And we're going to have a storm today, which is why I came up here to shoot this video. But I love this cabin because we can open the doors and windows and you can hear you just sit here and you're inside, but you're outside. So it's one of the benefits of, and really, I come here, sometimes I'm the only person here. Sometimes down on the flat, I'm the only person here for weeks, because people who are back in the world, they come here for 2 days and then they go back home. They don't get to stay and just experience the wind in the trees, which is why it's so great. Okay, so shout out to my buddies, Dark Nomad and Tom and Mike. I'll post links to the Dark Nomad's YouTube channel. I don't know where he is. He was in the Coconino Forest last time I watched one of his videos. I'll have to check him out. And thank you for watching the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. Bye-bye.